Hello there. This is Being God's Obedient Servant channel. If you're new to this is the Bible study channel where I go through the Bible chapter by chapter, verse by verse, and just go over what the Bible says and what it means in the different areas. Help people understand the Bible more. And so, if you're new to this and you're kind of new to the Bible, I do recommend starting off in Genesis chapter 1 on my channel and working your way up to here. Kind of hard to just jump into the middle of everything and then understand what's going on. So, today's study, we're going to be doing 2Samuel chapters 4 through 6. So let's go ahead and get started with this. It's going to be a pretty straightforward reading, but there is some good stuff to learn in here. As I said, there's always something to learn in the Bible every time you read it. So, chapter 4, verse 1. And when Saul's son heard that Abner was dead in Hebron, his hands were feeble, and all the Israelites were troubled. And Saul's son had 2 men that were captains of bands. The name of the one was Baanah, and the name of the other was Rechab, the sons of Rimmon, a Beerothite, of the children of Benjamin. For Beeroth also was reckoned to Benjamin. And the Beerothites fled to Gideon, and were sojourners there unto this day. And Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son that was lame of his feet. He was 5 years old when the tidings came of Saul and Jonathan out of Jezreel. And his nurse took him up and fled, and it came to pass as she made haste to flee that he fell and became lame, and his name was Mephibosheth. That's a tough one to say. So in these times here, they didn't have ability to do surgeries and pins, needles, and all these other plates and stuff to fix badly broken bones. And so literally, if you got a broken limb back in these times, it was life-threatening. It could cause you to either have a horrible life, blood poisoning, infections, whatever. You could die from it. You could not be able to hunt or work your land or anything of that nature. You know, it's kind of good in today's times, you know, where we got all these medical marvels and stuff. We should be happy having access to stuff like that. Of course, it's not free. It ain't meant to be free. You know, everyone has a job to do, and I don't think it should cost as much as it does, but I don't expect it to be free either. But yeah, anyways, let's continue on here. And the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rechab, and Baanah, went and came about the heat of the day to the house of Ishbosheth, who lay on a bed at noon. And they came thither into the midst of the house, as though they would have fetched wheat, and they smote him under the 5th rib, and Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. Now, it was very common in old times because there was no air conditioning, no furnaces, you know, stuff of that nature to easily warm yourself or to cool yourself. So in the heat of the day, you just rested because it was too hot to do stuff outside. It literally could kill you. So, but yeah, this was kind of common because they did a lot of their work when the sun went down because it was cooler and they could do more. But yeah, continue on here. Verse 7. For when they came into the house, he lay on his bed in his bedchamber, and they smote him and slew him and beheaded him, and took his head and gat them away through the plain all night. And they brought the head of Ishbosheth unto David to Hebron, and said to the king, Behold, the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, thine enemy, which sought thy life. And the Lord hath avenged my lord the king this day of Saul and of his seed. And David answered Rechab and Baanah his brother, the sons of Rimmon, Rimmon the Beerothite, and said unto them, As the Lord liveth, who hath redeemed my soul out of all adversity? When one told me, saying, Behold, Saul is dead, thinking to have brought good tidings, I took hold of him and slew him in Ziklag, who thought that I would have given him a reward for his tidings. How much more when wicked men have slain a righteous person in his own house upon his bed? Shall I not therefore now require his blood of your hand, and take you away from the earth? And David commanded his young men, and they slew them, and cut off their hands and their feet, and hanged them up over the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth, and buried it in the sepulchre of Abner in Hebron. Chapter 5. Then came all the tribes of Israel to David unto Hebron, and spake, saying, Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, thou wast he that led us out and brought us in Israel. And the Lord said to thee, Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel. So all the elders of Israel came to the king to Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. Yeah, I don't know where all these people used to say that in old times people only lived to be 30. That was the average old age, and this, that, and the other. Yeah, I mean, you even hear about it all the way past pre-Civil War, everything else. Even in America, people were, even to the Revolutionary War, people were living to their 90s, 70s to 90s, quite easily. I mean, I would understand it if you had to live off the land, and you lived alone, and you had to do everything by yourself and stuff like that, that life would be quite hard. But, we've always had societies of some sort for the most part. And people normally always had families. So even then, unless you were just garbage, your children would be there to help you, and you would be one of the elders. But yeah, it's just... So here we can clearly see that, David was 70 years old when he was no longer reigning over Israel. Now, it doesn't mean he passed away, though. He doesn't pass away. It's just the leadership changes to King Solomon, one of his sons. Actually, some other stuff. I keep forgetting which other son actually went against his own father, King David. One of his other sons go against everything, and he does wicked, and he pays the price for it. But we haven't gotten that far yet, so let's continue on here before I get way ahead of myself. Verse 5. In Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, which spake unto David, saying, Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither, thinking, David cannot come in hither. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, the same is the city of David. And David said on the day, Whosoever getteth up to the gutter, and smiteth the Jebusites, and the lame, and the blind, that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Wherefore they said, The blind and the lame shall not come into the house. So David dwelt in the fort, and called called it the city of David, and David built round about from Milo and inward. Of course, you can tell from there they didn't go in and kill the blind and the lame. It was just, it's kind of hard to understand that one, really. They knew they couldn't fight off an army, this, that, and the other, being primarily nothing but blind and lame people with disabilities and stuff. But, yes, of course, all of God's people takes care of the people that can't take care of themselves. There's a big difference with people that won't work versus people that can't work. That's your big difference between, lazy or disabled. But, anyways, continue on, verse 10. And David went on and grew great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him. And Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters, and masons, and they built David an house. And David perceived that the Lord had established him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people Israel's sake. And David took him more concubines and wives out of Jerusalem, after he was come from Hebron, and there were yet sons and daughters born to David. And these be the names of those that were born unto him in Jerusalem, Shemuel, and Shobab, and Nathan, and Solomon. Ibhar also, and Elizu, and Nepheg, and Japhia, and Elishama, and Eliada, and Eliphalet. Eliphalet? Let's go with Eliphalet. Sounds better. Now, if I remember correctly, it's Nathan is the one that goes against his father. I'm not too sure, but I think it is Nathan. Of course, this Solomon here will become the next king, which is also the one that's known as the wisest man of all time, because God blessed him with wisdom. But, yeah, continue on here. Verse 17. But when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines came up to seek David, and David heard of it and went down to the hold. The Philistines also came and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up to the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into mine hand? And the Lord said unto David, Go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into thine hand. And David came to Baal Perazim, and David smote them there, and said, The Lord hath broken forth upon mine enemies before me, as the breach of waters. Therefore he called the name of that place Baal Perazim. And there they left their images, and David and his men burned them. And the Philistines came up yet again, and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. And when David inquired of the Lord, he said, Thou shalt not go up, but fetch a compass behind them, and come upon them over against the mulberry trees. And let it be, when thou hearest the sound of a going in the tops of the mulberry trees, that then thou shalt bestir thyself, for then shall the Lord go out before thee to smite the host of the Philistines. And David did so as the Lord had commanded him, and smote the Philistines from Geba until thou come to Gazer. Chapter 6. Again, David gathered together all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people that were with him from Baalah of Judah, to bring up from thence the ark of God, whose name is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, that dwelleth between the cherubims. And they set the ark of God upon a new cart, and brought it out of the house of Abinadab that was in Gibeah, and Uzzah, and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drave the new cart. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was at Gibeah, accompanying the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. And David and all the house of Israel played before the Lord on all manner of instruments made of fir wood, even on harps, and on psalteries, and on timbrels, and on cornets, and on cymbals. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God, and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error. And there he died by the ark of God. And David was displeased, because the Lord had made a breach upon Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. So, here we can see, like I said, to tell other people, don't try to jump in the middle if you don't know the Bible too much. Uzzah didn't have permission. He wasn't a priest to be able to touch the ark. Only certain people are allowed to touch the ark. And even though Uzzah thought he was doing something good, it wasn't to God. Now, we got to remember that. This is a lesson here for us. Like, sometimes we think we're doing something good, but we're actually going against God. I will say this as an example. Say that somebody is sinning against the Lord, and God brings hard times on that person's life, trying to bring that person to Him. And until they hit rock bottom and have a very hard life and stuff, and that's when most people turn from their wicked ways and say, okay, Father, it's yours. Your way, not my way. But if you step in helping this person that you see as, someone homeless or someone needy of help, you in return could be getting in God's way of saving that person's soul. So, this is why we're always to pray before we do, major things and stuff. Now, also, you can see here that David wasn't, happy with God for what he did to Uzzah. Uzzah wasn't trying to open the ark or be disrespectful or anything else. He was trying to save the ark from falling off the cart. But here you can clearly see David is still God's anointed. He still has, a heart for the Lord, as it's said in the Bible. But just because God doesn't hold us against us if we're angry with Him, or we're displeased about some things, like especially when our life is going in a direction that we don't want it to go. It's going to make us angry. God knows this, and He's not going to hold it against us. Now, if we use things like this to turn us away from God and start serving the world, turning back to the world and stuff of that nature, if we go too far away, our names can be blotted out of the book of life, which means we can lose our salvation. It says it in Revelations, where it says, those whose names are in the book of life that have not been blotted out. So that clearly says our names can be removed from the book of life. It's not forever. We can go too far, against God. The main thing is when you're following God, and as long as you're still attempting to do the right thing, regardless if you've had a bad day and you lose your temper left and right and you're cussing the world up and down, you're even cussing God and cussing this and cussing that because the day's just been so horrible to you, and in the end you just drop to your knees, ask for forgiveness, and say sorry. Didn't mean it. At the time I did, but I didn't really mean it. I'm just angry, frustrated, blah, blah, blah. This stuff happens to me quite a bit. My life's kind of in turmoil a lot too. But, I'm one of those people that's been on disability early in life. I live alone. I got nobody to help me. Never got to have any children. Don't have a wife. I've been divorced. Lost 8 major careers. So, of course, my wife left because, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I get quite frustrated because I'm still trying to live life and do things. And it takes a toll on me when things don't go right, which makes my body hurt even more because of my disabilities. It puts me in a bad place. And I know God doesn't hold it against me because my heart is trying to follow the Lord. That's the difference between people that's not even trying, that they're just living in the world saying, oh, God's going to forgive me. All I got to do is say, forgive me, God. Forgive me. Okay, let's go party. No, that's a totally different scenario there. There's a big difference between sinning on purpose and accidentally sinning. Our whole thing is, as Christians, is to be Christ-like. So we're to be like Christ. We're to try to be. But God even says the best of us, is nothing but filthy rags in the eyes of the Lord. Now, I know I'm nowhere near as good as Abraham or Moses or, David. King Solomon, the wisest of all. It's like, you even have two. You got Epoch and I always mess up the names because you got Josiah and Josiah. They're said in certain different ways. Anyways, there's 2 people that have not even died on earth. They ascended into heaven. They were so holy. And even they are as nothing but filthy rags in the eyes of the Lord. And, so that's telling me, it's like, God knows we're not going to be perfect. We're going to fail horribly all the time. But it means, it's pretty much, what is our heart? What are we trying to do? Versus what are we just letting happen? Yeah, so David was upset with God about what happened. God didn't hold it against him. It's okay to question God, but we're also still to be obedient. The Bible says this, Old Testament, New Testament, everywhere in between. We are to do as we're told and trust in the Lord. His way is above our ways. There's a lot of things in life I don't understand. It's like, why? But I also understand it at the same time. It's like, example. My biggest thing is like, why is the wicked people the one blessed financially? Because if godly people were blessed more financially, they can help lead the world more and save more people. And I say this in my head, but then God speaks to my heart and kind of says, if we have to receive blessings to serve the Lord of that manner, are we truly serving the Lord because we want to? Or is it just for gain, financial gain or gain of power, fame and stuff like that? Because a Christian ain't supposed to seek money, power, fame. We're not to seek none of those things. The Lord is supposed to lead us. The Lord is supposed to be in charge. We're to seek a society, hopefully having a society of people where the Lord is in charge of us and we don't need a government. We don't need a government. If our whole society is following God, we don't need a government. All we got to do is do what we're told. God knows what we're doing. So, anyways, kind of spent too much time on this little area. But as I said, this is some of the stuff where we learn things in the Bible. There's always something to learn in the Bible. But let's continue on here. Still got a little bit to read. Verse 9. And David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, how shall the ark of the Lord come to me? Now, so you got to realize here also, David has never feared the Lord. He always served the Lord and know that the Lord would bless him. It says that here, after seeing an innocent person be struck down by God for touching the ark, it'd make anybody afraid. It's like, am I going to be struck down next for, did I do something wrong? Will I do something wrong? And this is the part now where it's like, Jesus says he finished the law, and this was one of them. This is part of the law. If you sin against the Lord may strike you down, or you to be stoned to death for sinning against God. And if Uzzah would have been today, even though he sinned against God accidentally, he'd be given his whole life to make things right. That's the difference between being under the law and being under grace. So, continue on, verse 10. So David would not remove the ark of the Lord unto him into the city of David, but David carried it aside into the house of Obed-Edom. I think that's how you say it. Obed-Edom, the Gittite. Let's go with that name. And the ark of the Lord continued in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. So here's where you kind of see where people start getting this thing that, well, if I wear a cross, if I have this in my life, I have that in my life, God's going to bless me. That is not. This is called being under superstition. But this is where the superstitious beliefs start coming from. Is this because, hey, it's like, the ark of the Lord was in this guy's house, and God blessed him and all of his household because the ark of God was there. And it's like, so if I have something of the Lord here in my home, God will bless my home. And that's not how it works. It's like pretty much we're to almost have as little in our house as possible, really. We are called to have a pilgrim's life as long as we can live as one. I've lived all over the country and stuff. Wherever I felt God wanted me to move to, I'd move there and start a new life. Find a job, start off, boom, have a place, save up some money first, make the move, rent a place, this, that, and the other, find a job, go from there. And, lived in Arizona, now in Tennessee. I'm from North Carolina. I've lived in multiple places in North Carolina. I feel that this is my final move was here to Tennessee. And so it's kind of like, just settling down now because of all my injuries from the military catching up with me, and I can't look for work no more. It's kind of totally different, and so. But yeah, anyways, I bought a house when I moved here and stuff, and I just haven't, I will say though, if the Lord puts it in my heart strongly, say, hey, sell it and move, I'd have to start working on that, but I think this was my last move. That's what kind of felt on me. That's why I bought a house instead of just renting. Anyways, but yeah, you can kind of, if you start going back to things like, what are people thinking that wearing a cross makes them godly? And then you read stuff like this, and I'm like, oh, yeah, because just because you wear a cross on a necklace around your neck or something like that, that doesn't mean you're godly. Tattoos are a sin, so getting a cross tattooed on your body, yeah, that's not a good thing. You're trying to take something good, something that you think is good, but in a sinful way, and putting it on your body. And God's against us scarring and marking of the body. That's already, we've already went through that in the Bible. So, yeah, some people are seeing where they get. Well, I got this passage from the Bible tattooed on me. I'm like, what? You don't have a Bible? You need to, you trying to write on your skin and read it later. It's, as I said, they're trying to justify doing something worldly, thinking it's godly. And this is the problem with the Bible not being taught properly. and going through the Bible chapter by chapter and verse by verse so everybody hears and knows what the Word says instead of just a passage here and a passage there and this, that, and the other, and making the Bible say what you want it to say, or just trying to do some message of, say, today's message is going to be on hope. Here in this passage speaks of hope. Here in this passage speaks of hope. Hope, 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 hope. And it's like, I really dislike people teaching the Bible that way, because they're not teaching the Bible, they're teaching sections of the Bible. They're not teaching the Bible. And trust me, the congregation, especially today, needs to be taught the whole Bible. We got a lot of women thinking they're godly and they are living worldly as can be, and they don't even know it. But also God says you're responsible for knowing His Word. If you love me, you'll seek me. If you seek me, you'll find me. That's a commandment from God to us. We are to love God with our heart, mind, and soul. So if you love the Lord, you're going to want to know Him. And to get to know Him, just read His Word and you'll learn everything about Him. And people are trying to call themselves Christians and stuff, and they don't read the Bible. If they do, they don't study it. They just skim through it and says, I read this. I read 4 chapters today. Yay. And they don't remember a single thing they read because they just skimmed through it real quickly. And this is why we are to study the Word of God. But anyways, let's continue on here. I can be in this area for quite some time, just going down different rabbit trails, and don't want to do that. So, and add an hour to this lesson, and some people were like, "Well, you just be quiet. I've heard enough of it. Quit beating a dead horse." I'm good at that, though. I will beat a dead horse and beat a dead horse and beat a dead horse. But a lot of times, there's a lot of people out there that needs to hear this over and over and over again because they just don't get it. And each time they're like, oh, even me. I've had things where I've read through the Bible over 15, 16 times. I can't remember how many times I've read through the Bible, but a lot of it I just didn't really get because I didn't study it. Until I read through it so many times and goes, wait a minute, this keeps coming up, and this keeps coming up. And it's like it's beating a dead horse, but it's, anyways. It's so we get it. It's so we understand it, especially what's very important to God. This is why my channel is called Being God's Obedient Servant. Because He calls for our obedience. So does Jesus. So, anyways, continue on, verse 12. And I was told King David, saying, the Lord hath blessed the house of Obed-Edom, and all that pertaineth unto him, because of the ark of God. So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness. And it was so that when they that bare the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed oxen and fatlings. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was girded with a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. And as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord. And she despised him in her heart. Well, she used to love him. Remember going back to other stories when it's like she even protected him and warned us, hey, my father's coming to kill you. You got to flee. And it says, but now she despises him. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, people can change on you. You got to watch that. But yeah, anyways. Yeah, she kind of talks down to him, this, that, and the other. I don't know how bad she was to him. I'm pretty sure if she would have been bad to him, he would have obeyed God and divorced her and cast her out. But that's what God does say, for a man to do with a cantankerous woman. A woman that's cantankerous means disobedient, argumentative, disrespectful, a person of strife. A feminist. God commands the man to divorce her and cast her out. That means no providing, no provisions, no food, no shelter, no clothing. And, if she wants to live in the world, let the world devour her. Let the world take her and abuse her and whatever. Let her live in it because that's what she wants. So, Yeah, see, God calls for the woman to obey. God calls for the man to obey. The woman's to obey the man. The children is to obey the mother and the father. The woman is to obey the man, and the man is to obey God. Well, as Christians, we're to obey Jesus, and Jesus has to obey God. So it all falls down, to the final thing that God, we obey God, and we each have a role. But throughout our whole lives, it's always talking about being obedient. Because if you're not going to obey the Lord, there ain't no sense for him having you around, because you're going to be disobedient. So, anyways, jumping down another rabbit trail. Got to watch myself. Verse 17. And they brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in his place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And as soon as David had made an end of offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. And he dealt among all the people, even among a whole multitude of Israel, as well to the women as men, to every one a cake of bread, and a good piece of flesh, and a flagon of wine. I don't know what a flagon is. I'm pretty sure it's some, whatever, a drink of wine. I don't know, a cup or a bladder, I don't know, a gallon. I have no clue, but it's kind of irrelevant what we really need to know from the Lord. But yeah, anyways. So all the people departed, every one to his house. Then David returned to bless his household. And Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David, and said, How glorious was the king of Israel today, who uncovered himself today in the eyes of the handmaids of his servants, as one of the vain fellows shamelessly uncovereth himself. Here she is talking down to her husband. And David said unto Michal, It was before the Lord which chose me before thy father, and before all his house, to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore will I play before the Lord. Sorry. Therefore will I play before the Lord. I said it in the form of a question there. I'm like, wait a minute. Verse 22. And I will yet be more vile than thus, and will be base in mine own sight, and of the maidservants which thou hast spoken of them shall I be had in honor. Therefore Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children unto the day of her death. That's the end of this lesson. That's the end of chapter 6 there, but yeah. So God punished her. Now you gotta remember, God's commandment to all women that their desire is their husband is to rule over them. But God says a woman that does not desire a husband and birthing children is useless in the eyes of the Lord. So, in all of societies, all the way up until the 1960s here in America, a woman that had no children was thought to have been cursed or useless. It was, very, very heartening for a woman to never have children, to be barren. They didn't, they wouldn't like, they knew that their purpose was to provide children. And so they would not, serve their purpose. So their life was purposeless. And so that was her punishment from God, because she, as I said, in these times, God punished you immediately. For things. That's what being under the law was, being punished immediately for things. So good we're not under that today, because especially just the other day I lost my temper about a lot of things and stuff. And lo below, if God would have stopped my heart and ended me then, it would have definitely been justified, because I was having a bad day. Yes, that's the big thing. It's like, we got to be so grateful that we're under grace now instead of the law. Just flipping someone off and cussing them in traffic and stuff is a sin against God. You imagine being put to death immediately for getting angry in traffic. Whew. But yeah, I'm still working on that, controlling my emotions. A lot of us are probably still working on that. It's a hard thing to do. We just want a stress-free life, but a lot of times we can't learn to handle stress unless we're in stress. And we don't want to be in stress. It's like, I know I don't. I'm pretty sure most of y'all don't either. But yeah, anyways. I said that's the end of this lesson here. So, remember to pray. Pray for yourself, pray for your family, your loved ones, your friends, your neighbors. Pray for the lost. Pray for these churches today that aren't teaching the word and the congregation isn't obeying God's word. It's so sad to watch these people, I used to go to so many different churches and stuff, and I'd start talking to people, this, that, and the other, say, hey, well, this is not being done right, that's not being done right, which is one of our jobs as a Christian, is to leave the 99 and go after the one. When you're seeing people that are calling themselves godly sinning against the Lord, and you point it out to them, and what bothers me is I get attacked for it. How dare you say this? Blah, 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 blah. I'm saying, like, this is God's word. It's not my word. I'm just a human. Honestly, I could care less. These are God's commandments, but they get offended, and it's like, that's how you know the place isn't godly. You got to watch for these places. Jesus says, beware of those that tickle the ear. If they say, well, the times are different, you always got to do is remember to say one simple phrase. God said his word's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, which means his people are the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So, until next time, God bless, good night, and goodbye.